Thank you, guys. Oh, man. So, I'm not just a Dallas Cowboy fan, but I'm also the president of a club here in Durango. It's called the Hunter Club. We support first responders, fire, sheriff, state patrol, police, and we reached out to Ignacio, Fort Lewis, Mesa, and Fort Lewis police as well. We got a couple of policemen back there too. Just pop in, guys. You can, yeah, thanks. So Thursday night we had our banquet and we honored the the main mall fire and police that worked the actual fire. For those of you that don't know, in 1974, where the main mall is located, we had a fire that killed a policeman and a fireman. That's how the club was started. So since 1974, it's our 45th year. When somebody dies in the line of duty, we write them a check for $20,000 to their family. So, but these two guys here, Pat Kelly and Butch Gomez, both were part of that fire, and Butch was right there with Nikki and Gail Emerson, the cop that were killed. And so anyway, it was a great evening just for them to be remembered and to be honored. So a couple weeks ago I asked Pastor Mark, I says, what are you guys preaching on that week? And so he said, Andy's going to preach on gratitude and entitlement. I said, is there any way we could bring some first responders here? And I want to tell you guys something that, actually, can I get my assistant to come up too? Sorry, Andy, I use him too. So go ahead. So we're going to give you guys a gold coin. And for me, gold, there's a process to make the metal. And I believe that as I have come to work with and be surrounded by first responders, that they go through a process in itself too to become what they are, and that is people that sacrifice, that serve. And I'm telling you, these guys absolutely hate doing this. They hate to stand up front and to be thanked. But you guys need to know, and I know I don't just speak for this church, but this community, that we respect what you do, and you are to be honored. So, thank you. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Go Cowboys.
All these guys, I know a lot of them are on duty, and for this brief moment in time, there is no safer place to be than right here. So, thank you, gentlemen, very much. We are grateful, very grateful for what you do and for how you support and look after our community. It means so much that whenever I see a fire truck, a sheriff's vehicle, or a police vehicle, I am just so grateful, and I pray for you guys. Because, gosh, you need it so much. Anyway, man, Jerry, you got me all emotional this morning, so thank you. Thank you. Hey, this morning, Andy, why don't you come on up, and as he's walking up, I think that's you. I wanna just say that this worship team this morning, they are awesome, and I am so thankful and grateful for this group of young people that are up here. You see them kind of interspersed with our regular worship team, but this group of young people lead our high schoolers and our middle schoolers in worship every week on Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights. And just the caliber of leaders that they are is demonstrated to you by how they lead us on a Sunday morning. It's no different. What they're doing on Sunday is how they lead on Wednesday and Tuesday nights. So it's just really cool. What a great testimony to what our youth ministry is doing by the caliber of leaders that are being brought up and raised up to lead worship. Lead a bunch of us older folks. They're great. And I'm just so thankful for what Andy has done, for what Drew has done, and for all of the other amazing leaders for our young people.
Thanks, Drew.
So thanks you guys very much. All right.
Check 1, 2. Is this? I feel like I've got the issues. I've got different issues. Just talk amongst yourselves, you know. 1, 2. It's only awkward, Adam, if you make it awkward. I don't know about you, but Jerry makes me emotional every time I see him, so love you, Jerry. Makes me emotional when I see the Browns play the Cowboys, I'll tell you that. A couple confessions. Every time I'm on stage, I have confessions. Someone asked me if I'm a true believer of the Browns team. The answer is, once you're a Browns fan, you're always a Browns fan. And the truth of the matter is, I proclaimed and confessed I was a Browns fan on the stage. And as the way I value my life, once you confess it, you believe it. So I am a Browns fan. If you'd like to add more money in the tithe and offering, just put Andy's Brown Fund. And yeah, anyway, a couple things I want to say. I know most of you left, but I just want to say thank you again to the first responders. I'm the youth director here at the church, and unfortunately what comes with the job and working with teenagers is you deal with a lot of social issues, and I've called 911 more times than I can count in the last 4 years, and I've again and again and again just be blown away by how you guys respond first, right? And I get very emotional every time I call 911. I remember one of our teenagers collapsed and couldn't breathe, and I called 911, and my voice isn't very helpful with Americans' voices on the phone, and try to explain what was going on over the phone. And these guys are just amazing. You serve, and the police department, you guys are so dedicated. So thank you guys just yet again. So, and I don't know if Randy Black, you're still in the room, but you haven't taken me out on your yacht in a while, so, or your boat, whatever you call it. So you can do that. Maybe not when it's cold. So last week, John, if you want to throw that image up, Mark, I think, announced to the congregation that I was talking on entitlement, and there was this weird noise that went over the room. And I had a couple people came up to me today saying I really had to get out of bed extra harder this morning because I knew you were talking about this. And this isn't something I like to talk about. This isn't something I'm necessarily good at, but it's something I feel like we need to talk about as the church. I've been told so many times that my generation and the generation below me is so entitled. And for me, I don't want to proclaim those things. I want to have the conversation about those things. Because they're entitled because we have allowed things, and you get what you allow. And so if our younger generations are doing stuff, we as older generations, and I'll put myself in that category for a very brief second, we have to not only help them by enabling what's right and what's true, but we have to teach the opposite. And I believe the opposite of entitlement, in my opinion, is always going to be gratitude. How grateful can we be? And then the entitlement will hopefully fly outside the window. So we have been doing this message. Tyler, can I swap mics? I feel like this mic is going to bother me. I knew you were going to be enthusiastic. I am grateful for sound men who also hear things like that. Give it up for check 1, 2. Woo! You good, Tyler? You're going to have to make an EQ and make me sound pretty again, Tyler. Man, this mic's heavy. I need to work out. You worship team's not kidding when you say you get a workout when you worship. It's because your mics are heavy. We've been on this road, the road less traveled. So we had Nick a couple weeks ago speak about love and fear and the decisions we make in love and fear. And then last week, who was here last week when Mark got like ladders out and stuff? If you weren't here last week, highly recommend that. You can see our co-senior pastor get up on a very tall ladder, which some of us were a little scared for him. And he talked about offense and how do we deal with offense. And he brought offense up on, and he talked about get over it, Elsa, was the word I used, but he just said get over it. And I'm going to kind of conclude this collection of talks on gratitude entitlement. But Mark sent me this image earlier in the week, and you can't really see it on this. I think it's just like a hipster road, right, Mark, with some green stuff? Yeah. And I thought about this, and I was like, man, the road less traveled sounds cool. It makes for like good hashtags and stuff, but no one ever does it, right? Like, who lives in Bayfield? Or who lives at least 30 minutes out of town? Let's see your hands. Okay, when you get up in the morning and you go to work, you don't suddenly look at your spouse or someone you live with or whatever and you say, you know what, today I'm not going to take the highway. I'm just going to go as the crow flies, and I'm just going to drive across people's farms and yards, and I'm going to go on the road less traveled because it sounds fun. No, you don't do that. You go on what's ease, you go on what's convenient, and you go where the coffee kind of takes you, right? Now, I have a confession. I know there's at least 10 people in the room who do this. Every time I drive to town or city market, I always try and find a new way to get there. Is anyone like me? You just get a little bit bored of driving the same way, and you're like, this is boring. Let's just see if I can go, and then you end up in Ignacio, and you're like, oh, man, what am I doing here? Who here thinks that's completely ridiculous? I was like, yep, you and you too. I think I just get bored, and I think I just like to try and like live outside the box a little bit, and I did this the other day, and I ended up, I was like, where am I? And I got out my map, and I was just trying to drive down to town to get something, and I ended up on the other side of Purgatory, and I was like, man, I know my geography like balance is pretty good in comparison to my wife's, but it's not that bad, and it's true. But we'd never take the road less traveled. We always want to take, I would say, the road more convenient, right? Or the road that is ease. And today, I want to try and challenge us with the theme of entitlement and gratitude is, are we willing to try and travel down a road less traveled, but are we willing to trailblaze it so the people behind us can have a road that's easier to travel? Does that make sense? So when we cross-pollinate with our generations, with our different ministries, with our different jobs, that the people behind us can be like, I want to go where he's going, and hopefully you'll make it easier. And I'm going to use the story that we find I think it's in Luke 7. I wrote down Luke 9. I think that's wrong, but we're going to use that. So I won't use it right now, but if you have your Bibles, get ready in Luke 7. It's also on the app under sermon notes or something. So over the last Sarah, correct me when I'm wrong, over the last 3 months in Roots, we've been doing a series of talks called Caution. I don't know if you have a thing for that, John, but we've been doing a talk, and we covered the underground. It kind of looks like it's in a basement and there's graffiti everywhere anyway, but we covered it in caution tape and warning signs and slippery when wet, not the Bon Jovi album, but like slippery when wet things, and we covered it in this, and we try to teach the teenagers. I wanted to teach the teenagers what are the things in your life that you need to be aware of. Not necessarily do or don't do, but what do you need to be aware of? And I think there's a section of talks in life that we're kind of scared to talk about in the church, especially with teenagers. So we started with pride, then we went on to let's be careful what we say with our mouth and we listen to and what we watch. We did caution, the Bible is real. We did a talk called red light, yellow light, green light, which is talking about the 3 areas of life that we need to do. We talked about caution, look after your soul. One of my favorite ones, me and my wife did, we did caution dating, and try to remind the boys that don't ask a girl out over text or through a friend, ask her to her face and tell her she's beautiful. And don't you dare ask a girl out without talking to her dad. Can I get a witness? There we go. Just the men. Yeah! I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I asked Becca, Dad, if I could marry her at the Irish Embassy over a pint, because that's what we do in England. And I'm a big believer of asking the man for the privilege to date your daughter. I'm only saying this because the middle school is in the room, and I just want to keep repeating it. And girls, don't you let a guy date you unless he's done that. You can just say no. Yeah, there's all the mums. Yeah, woo! But we did this talk on, and I said caution entitlement. And I didn't think this talk was going to go well. High schoolers, I confess, I took about 20 minutes to prepare it the day before. And I was like, this will be fun. Like, we're entitled. Let's just see where it goes. And I started talking about like how frustrated we can get when the internet doesn't work and we have to wash dishes, and we went down that road, and how like of a privilege we should live in our life, and we live a very privileged life in this world. I don't know if you know, but you're in Durango, you're on the 0.9% of the world for wealth. So when you ever talk about the 1%, you are the 1%. Doesn't matter where you live in Durango, you are the 1%. That's just the statistic. We talked about it, and I asked the room, what do we think entitlement means? And somebody shouted out, entitlement means you think you deserve something that you don't. And I was like, yeah, I think that's what entitlement means. You think you have the right to something that you don't. And then I asked a very dangerous question, and the room changed instantly. And I think some of the high schoolers and leaders, you remember this moment. I said, what do you think you actually deserve? And a voice from my right-hand side, a very dear one of our high schoolers, said, we only deserve death. And I was like, wow, you just changed the room. And I paused for a second, and I was expecting the next one to be, we deserve free pizza at youth group, which I would agree with. I deserve a good girlfriend. I deserve that because I studied all night long, I deserve A's on my test. I was expecting that. And then from the left back corner of the room, I heard, I deserve a dad. And it broke me. And I was like, yes, you do. But then I came back to the first point. I deserve death. And if we believe what we believe about our Christian faith, grace in itself is not deserving. We don't deserve the grace that we get. Amen? We don't get, that's the definition of grace. We don't deserve it. Yet there is a God who loves us unconditionally that will pour out grace upon grace upon grace, and I'll keep going for eternity. But we don't deserve it. So actually, to motivate us all and have a happy Thanksgiving break, I actually believe we deserve, as humans, we deserve death. And this isn't happy, but we don't do it. If you read the book of Romans, it goes on and on about this, how we're fallen in our nature in itself. Yet the one who could save us did. And it was grace upon grace and love upon love. And I know this is kind of heavy, but that's the foundation I want to start with, and then I'll make us feel a little bit happy afterwards. Because I feel like if I make you feel sad, it's easy to make you feel a little happier. But I do believe that everything in life that we get is not on our own merit. I had a dear friend of mine write a song, and the first two lines of the song were this. It says, I am not my own, I am not because of me. And I was like, whoa. I am not my own, and I am not because of me. And the gratitude level that we should be living in should be out of this world. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and boy, should they be grateful. I think as soon as you have children, you recognize what it's like to live a little bit more selfishly. The night before I got married, I think I've said this before, but a dear friend of mine called Michael, when I was in England, he pulled me aside and he says, if you want to realize how selfish you are, get married. And he goes, until you're ready to do something about it, don't have children. And after I got back from honeymoon, he goes, do you realize how selfish you are? And I was like, nope, and I don't really want to. And then about a year after I had both my kids, he just sent me a message. He goes, do you realize how selfish you are yet? And I was like, yeah, I should write a letter to my parents. And I think in our nature, ultimately, we are so selfish, and that's why gratitude is not extended. We are thinking about ourselves, we're thinking what we can get out of people, and yet we're not willing to extend a grateful heart. And I know it's Thanksgiving, and we're going to kind of go into that. And I think maybe in the States we have Thanksgiving in November, and I've actually celebrated Thanksgiving, I think, since I was about 9. I didn't know why. There's food and be thankful, 2 things I'm good at. Let's go. And but I feel like maybe in May we should just have like a meal that's like an ungratified meal where we just sit around complaining. Because I feel like, why is it so much easier to complain about everything than to actually be grateful for it, you know? It's so much easier to complain about someone, or it's their fault, or they did this, instead of looking at them being like, No, I'll own that. That was on me. I'm super grateful for this conversation, you know? And I Googled gratitude for a while, and I shouldn't have done that. You never should Google anything. And I Googled gratitude, and the only thing I kept on seeing was like all these hashtags and cool Instagram posts about gratitude is, you know, you should have an attitude of gratitude. And I actually believe that gratitude is not an attitude. Gratitude is an action. Gratitude's a verb. Gratitude is something you do. And I was talking with some of the elders about this before, and I was like, I don't know if I'll say this phrase, but I think I will. You know the phrase, it's the thought that counts? You know how much I'm beginning to realize that's not true? Because I could be really grateful for someone, but if I don't do anything about it, what's the point, right? Gratitude is the action of saying, I'm grateful for you. I could think about it all day long, and I could live in this bubble being like, man, they're cool. But why don't you just go say it? Do you know what I mean? If Jesus thought he loved us and never did anything about it, we would never know, right? Yet he sent his son to be like, here's the ultimate form of gratitude. I will send my son to you and do it. Actually, John, if you want to throw up that, there's a verse, and I've used this 3 or 4 times in 1 John 4, I think it's verse 7 to 10. John, do you want to throw on the Sky Bible? Yeah, it says, my beloved friends, first of all, which is the last thing he ever said to Judas, if we want to go down that thing. My beloved friends, let's continue to love each other since love comes from God. What the author, Grandpa John, the best friend of John, best friend of Jesus is saying at this time is that actually love itself only comes from God. Love has never come from our souls, never come from our heart. Love has only ever come from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and experiences a relationship with God. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God. So what the author is saying, John, you can just take it off now and put the other one back up. I think what the author is saying is you love Jesus to the level you live and work like Jesus, right? You love Jesus to the level you live like Jesus. So if you want to know if someone's close to Jesus, watch what they do, right? Because the closer, and you'll see this in the story in a second, the closer you get to being in a relationship with Jesus is when things start to change. Every single time someone gets close to Jesus in any of the stories, things change. Things change. And it's interesting, if I was reading, I try to read the 4 Gospels a lot, and I just try and read them in sittings just to read them as like a storybook. And it's interesting what happens when someone comes to Jesus or when Jesus goes to them. Just study it for a second. You'll be really fascinated what happens when the lady who touched his robe or the lady in a second who breaks the jar, when they come to Jesus, what Jesus says to them versus when Jesus goes to them. But if we really know who Christ is, I'm telling you, your love language and your gratitude will go up. And I think the farther we're away from Christ, our entitlement goes up. We're complaining that guy's going a little slow. The Wi-Fi's gone out and your world is over. That makes sense? It takes 3 seconds to download a YouTube video instead of 2. We've got a long way to go. You like someone Instagram post and they don't like you, so you disown them. Like, we've got a long way to go. So let's jump into the story. So this is Luke. Is it Luke 7, John? It's Luke 7? Good. I don't know why I wrote down 9. Maybe we'll just go to that one too. Luke 7. So this is towards the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He's picked the 12 disciples, his 12 misfits that they're following him. And there's different stuff happening. And Jesus finds himself, John, are we in the NLT version? I think we are in the NLT version. Do you want to throw it up? Jesus finds himself invited into a house of one of the Pharisees, one of the leading people of Scripture at the time. They seemed to not believe who Jesus was, and they seemed to be trying to catch him out at any moment they could. And for some reason, we're not sure. We knew this Pharisee was called Simon, but we're not sure why he invited Jesus into his home. Maybe he wanted to get to know him. Maybe he wanted to find fault with him. But I love verse 36. It's just so practical. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down. I'm like, okay, let's just leave it like that. Jesus said yes. And what we're about to find out is there's a really awkward moment that Jesus talks about, and it's one of the smallest parables in the gospel. And it's one of the few times that Jesus actually answers a direct question. He normally avoids direct questions, and he throws a story, but this one he answers with a direct answer. So let's check it out. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard that he was eating there, you see, she heard his reputation, and so she ran and she brought a beautiful alabaster jar, which is just a stone jar, really, filled with expensive perfume. She knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. I'm just going to get my version out. She kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. When the Pharisee Simon, who invited him, saw this, he said to himself, not to anyone else, just a passive-aggressive comment, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. And the word sinner he actually used was more like she does something wrong in the public. She was a prostitute, it says in one thing. And it says in one version, she was very known within the town. Then Jesus answered Simon's thoughts out loud. Simon, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. Then Jesus told this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver, which is about a year and a half's worth of wages, and 150 pieces of silver, which is about 3 months' wages at the time. But neither of them could repay, so he kindly forgave both of them, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? Simon responded, I suppose the one he canceled the larger debt. And I love this bit when Jesus says, that's right. Sometimes you got to think of the tone. I think Jesus was probably a little sarcastic, right? He was like, yeah, duh. Then I don't think that's what he said, but then he turned. This is beautiful. Think about just picture this in your mind. Then he turned to the woman, but spoke to Simon. So what he's doing, he's recognizing the moment. He's recognizing who she is. Look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't wash my feet and didn't take the dust from my feet. But she washed them with her tears and wiped them with her very own hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil on my head, but she anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and this is a little poke, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. A person who is forgiven shows only a little love. Then she said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. The men around the table said to amongst themselves, as men do, who is this man that goes around forgiving sins? And then Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Shalom. You know the word faith there? Faith appears about 336 times in the New Testament. It's over 300 times. The word faith, I don't think we should use that word faith. When I actually try to figure out where the word faith is, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, our English language is not very strong. We don't have a very strong language. That's why sometimes we have to go back to it. The word faith really is actually persuasion. So let's just say that again. Your persuasion has saved you. Go in peace. Isn't that beautiful? You've been persuaded so much that Christ is who he says it is, so you go and break a jar of years' worth of salary. You know that what people think of you. You know your reputation. You bust into a house of two religious leaders debating about you, one who would judge you, and the other one that you'll pour all of your perfume on the feet that you need for your business. You'll pour on his feet, and you'll cry behind him, and you'll wipe his dusty, gross feet that have been in the streets with your hair. That is being persuaded. Do you see what I mean? I want that persuasion. I want that level of faith. So if we go back into the thing of persuasion, when Jesus said to Peter, you of little faith, let's just change the word. Oh, you of little persuasion. You have been so close to me for 2 years, yet I have not persuaded you, not manipulated you. I have not convinced you. Let me again show you my love. Gratitude is the act. It's not a thought. When's the last time you told your spouse how grateful you are for them? When's the last time you told someone you live next to them how unbelievably grateful for them? Because you know what? The people in your life, spouse, dog, cowboy fan, whoever they are, do you know the people in your life don't have to be in your life? Do you realize that? They choose to be in your life. They've chosen you. Do you know this church doesn't have to stay this way? This church doesn't have to be here. Mark and Jill could just quit. They have the full permission to quit. They choose it, right? Your spouse chooses to extend love. Teenagers, I hope you choose to honor your parents. They make a choice. Any choice that's not your own, you should honor, right? Any positive choice that's not your own, you should honor. First responders, they have a choice, right? A choice to ultimately lay down their own desires and to serve. Jesus had a choice to leave the communion of heaven and to come down and just be his son here. He could have had a choice to come in as a warrior, which everybody wanted, to overthrow the Roman government. But he came as the most delicate baby. I don't know if any of you have seen The Mandalorian right now on Disney+. He came as baby Yoda. Jack's giving me a thumbs up, Mark's shaking his head. I'm halfway there. He came as a small baby, as delicate as possible, and being like, let me be one of you. As the Message version says it says the author wrote himself into his own story and became flesh and blood, and then I love the next bit, and moved into your own neighborhood. So beautiful. But the author of the story became the hero of the story, and he moved in. He didn't have to. Do you know that? And he saw what was happening. He goes, I will extend my grace to you. Will you extend your gratitude to me? And this is why I believe with all of my heart when studying this, that gratitude is not an attitude. Because Jesus has never commanded us to a feeling. Jesus commands us only to action. Does that make sense? Love is not a feeling. Love is an action of putting someone else above you. Gratitude, therefore, cannot be an attitude. Gratitude has to be an action. Let me kind of explain this and break it down. Thanks, Drew. Until we change our minds on things and until we change our actions on things, your reality will always be the same. And I want to break this down because it relates to Luke 7. Until you change your mind and make action, your thinking, until you change your mind, your thinking, and your actions, your reality will not change. However, the opposite is not the same. You can change your geography, you can change your clothes, you can cut your hair and get a tattoo, you can move into a big house, but nothing will change. Once you change your thinking and you make action, then things will change, and you can insert gratefulness to every change. I'm just going to read this how I wrote it because I think it's better than I would say it. You can have the right job, but with a terrible mindset, and you'll quit. You could have an okay marriage. Let me stick to my notes. That's not working well, and you can act out of that, and nothing will change. Actually, the latter will happen. And this one will hurt a little bit. You can be at the right church with the wrong attitude and the bad outlook, and you'll quit. But the reverse is you can be at an okay, mediocre job and change your attitude, and you can end up being a light on a city that no one else has seen, and you watch how change comes around you. You can be in an okay marriage, but you speak to your spouse and you tell them what you see in them and what you love about them, you watch how that person changes. You can be at an okay church, but you speak life into that church and life into its congregation, and you watch how revival sets in the four walls. You have to make action. Sometimes I'm done with the thinking of it. It's not the thought that counts. I think it's the action that counts. Jill helped me see this the other day. I realized that sometimes if you're not doing okay, sometimes you need to sit down with someone and just talk about the conflict. And we had a beautiful moment, and I haven't thanked her enough for it. And we sat down for probably like an hour the other day. And I said this phrase to her. I said, I didn't mean to do that. And she said something that pastors should say to me, and it hurt bad. But she said, but that's not what you did. And I was like, okay, time to go, Thanks, Jill. It's true. We can think about doing stuff all day long, but what did you actually do about it, right? And I think when Jesus is saying all this stuff in John, can you put up the 1 John chapter 4? Yeah. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God, because God is love. So you can't know him if you don't love. This is how God showed his love for us. He sent his only son into the neighborhood so that we could actually live. This is the kind of love we're talking about, that. Not that we once loved God. You can kill it there, John. Love's never started with us. Love always started with him. He's always the first. He's always the initiator. He's always the promise giver. He's always the healer. He's the miracle man. I feel like we should sing that song, History Maker by Delirious. Is there like 3 people? Mark Jones might know that song. Do you guys remember that song, History Maker? Man, I got saved to that song. Let's go. You have to change your mindset. And this is what I kind of want us to do about this. What do you think you deserve? Just think about it for a second. What do you think you deserve? What did Simon the Pharisee deserve in this moment? Did he deserve a pat on the back by Jesus? We knew what the woman deserved before this, right? Jesus even called her out, saying her sins, and she has many of them. But then he says that beautiful thing at the end. Though she has many sins, she has been forgiven because she has shown me much love. Are we willing to live a type of life that we would break into someone's house to meet our Maker, kneel behind him, and weep in his feet? I want that type of persuasion. I'm going to stop using the word faith. I think we should just use the word persuasion. I think it just makes more sense. I want to be persuaded that much. That makes sense? It doesn't matter about your reputation in that moment. It doesn't matter what you've done or what you're currently doing. You know that you've always are welcome to come. And the coolest thing about Jesus, and band, you can come back on because you sound pretty and you look good. The coolest thing is when Jesus came, and I think this is probably the way to describe it. If I'll use Mark as an example. If Mark was boasting to me that he was closer to the sun, S-U-N, the big fire thing in the sky, if Mark was closer to the sun than me, in one way he's correct. He might be close to the sun, but ultimately we're both millions of miles away, right? So what are we doing judging someone that's a little farther in front of us or behind us? We've all fallen short. And when Jesus came, this is what I believe he came. He came and he set the playing ground. He says, everyone has the right to the foot of the cross. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care what you're about to do. What I care about is the decision you make right now. You have the right, you deserve, we don't deserve to be at the foot of the cross. But I'll extend my grace. I will leave the communion, unity of heaven itself, the beautiful dance that was happening, and I will come down and say, the playing ground is even. Everyone is welcome. And if you don't believe that, I've got some good news for you. You can get it. You know the only thing we should do in life is receive? Do you realize this, right? The only thing in life that we need to do as humans is receive. We're done. Go home. Like, you just receive what God has told you, and from the outflow, everything else will happen. If you don't know who Jesus is, there is a table, if we can use that metaphor, with an empty seat on it. And it's like, do you want to come to the meal? Thanksgiving's ready? Like, do you want to come? And Jesus is such a gentleman, and it says this again and again in the scriptures. He'll knock on the door, and he'll wait. I don't know if you guys have read The Shack. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's a bit in The Shack where the main character, he goes up and he's debating, like, I know, he basically knows he's about to meet God face to face. And he knows that the being of God is in this building. And it just talks about his, process of going up to the door. And it says that should he go bang down the door? Should he kick the door down? Should he knock patiently on the door? And it says when he enters his mind and he establishes some balance, and just as he pulls his fist up to the door to do so, the door flings wide open. Because Jesus always waits for you. He was ready, right? The door flings wide open, and standing in front of him was a large, smiling, beaming African-American woman. Engulfed him, picked him up, and said his full name again, Andrew John Sloan. That's my name. And he says, just as he was about to let loose with his anger, all of the anger he thought was inside him disappeared, and he was equally delighted to see someone he's never seen face to face before. And the person said, "It's okay, honey. You can let it out." And just as he was about to, he stopped. And she says, "Well, why don't you take off your coat and come and sit down?" That's the invitation for you. Just when you're ready to let loose with a fist whatever's going on with your life, when you're ready to patiently knock, when you're ready to get a shotgun and get down the door because you want something to happen, as soon as you're ready, that's when God says, "Welcome." It's that easy. And we make it so complicated, don't we? So can we just stand and can we just have a moment for a second and we'll sing some songs and Drew will lead us. Jesus, we thank you so much that you make it so incredibly easy. And I confess and apologize that we make it so incredibly hard. We're so entitled. We think we deserve way more than we get. We think we deserve that new promotion. We think we deserve our spouse to get better. We think we deserve for our kids to act a certain way. We think we deserve the money that we get. When actually, Jesus, it's all yours to begin with. So when you ask for 10% of our money, it's all yours to begin with. When you ask us to lay down our lives, it's your life to begin with. When you ask us to lay down your reputation, it's yours to begin with. When you ask us to lay down our actions and willing to love someone, it's your love to begin with. We're the receivers. You're always the ignition. You always begin everything, Jesus. Your love is what started this whole thing. So, Jesus, we come right now before you and say we're sorry. We're sorry that we get so caught in our head and we get so entitled. And Jesus, we want to live a life of gratitude, the action of gratitude. I want to live a life, Jesus, where people around me know they're loved and appreciated because I've said something. Not for my well-being, but so people always have a signpost pointed back towards you. Jesus, I know that it says again and again in Scripture, they'll know you love me by the way they love each other. May this house, may this church, may this family, may this congregation and community, may we be a community that is known by the love that we show for each other because they will see you. I'm tired of Christians picking on Christians and Christians judging other Christians. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we get so entitled and so worked up in our own stuff. When actually we should be the most grateful people on the planet because we understand the truth. And the truth of the matter is that you are grace and that you are love. Period. End of story. And that Jesus, you didn't come to make bad people better. You came to make dead people come alive. And I want to be a dead person that comes alive. I want other people to see me. I don't know how he does that. It can only be Jesus through him. I want to be as known for a church of a bunch of failures that do something because they called on the name of Jesus. I want to be known as a community whose miracles happen because we were willing to kneel behind our Maker and cry. The battle's not in the shouting, the battle's in the kneeling. I'm sorry when we get it wrong, Jesus. Would you help us this week on our random Mondays, on our average Wednesdays, on our awkward Fridays? Would you help us to actually understand this? When we're in an argument with our spouse, when we're trying to get our kids to bed, especially then, would you help us to reach out with gratitude with our actual voices and actions? When we see that lonely guy on the street, when we see that depressed coworker in the office, would we actually do something about it? Otherwise, we're going to be not here one day with regret. One last story, and then I'll get off stage. It's a metaphor, it's a parable, but it's funny. You guys have probably heard it. It's a dad joke. There was a guy in the ocean. He was treading water, and he knew he was about to die. You guys know where this story's going. And he was like, God, God, come save me. And the guy on a surfboard comes up and he's like, bro, let me give you like a ride back to the shore. And he's like, no, bro, God will save me. A couple minutes later, he is praying, God, God, come save me. And a little speedboat comes. He's like, get in. You'll catch hypothermia, you'll die. Jump in the boat. And he's like, no, God will save me. And later, a big cruise line comes. They drop a lifeboat down. Same thing. God will save me. This guy ends up dying. He meets his maker, pounds on the door face to face. And Jesus says to him, why don't you get on the surfboard or the boats? I sent them to you. The point of the story is we need each other. You are probably the miracle that somebody's waiting for. I'm only in this room because someone told me about Jesus. You get it? I guarantee you the person next to you is going through a really hard time in their life right now and you have no idea. Maybe the person behind you, in front of you. You know whose job it is to help them? Love you guys. Let's worship.
This song you might not have heard before, you might not know the words, but man, just let them wash over you in this time. Let them really just sink into your heart, because it's exactly what Andy was talking about.